Welcome to the Business of Tattooing, the podcast that goes beyond the ink to dive deep into the industry, the hustle, and what it really takes to succeed in the world of tattooing. I'm Rob Smead, founder of Electrum Supply, and your guide through the business side of this ever-evolving art form. Each week, we'll break down the latest trends, tackle the challenges artists face, and sit down with industry pros to talk shop, unfiltered and straight to the point. Whether you're an artist, a shop owner, or just someone who loves the craft, this is the podcast built for you. So, sharpen your skills, level up your business, and let's get to work. This is the Business of Tattooing. Well, Dale, I'm sorry for taking you away on an important day like your son's birthday, bro.
He's napping right now, man.
Well, that's cool. Thanks for spending some time with me today on a special day.
Couldn't have worked out any better. So, how are things with you, man? How's everything going with the podcast, the business, the coaching?
I mean, it's okay. Business is weird, you know? That's what I've been saying to people when they ask me that question. It's just weird. Yeah. I feel like the whole world's weird right now, man, you know?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. As tattoo artists, the world has always been weird. It's just actually having an impact on us. We always lived life on our own terms, and now those terms are being kind of challenged in a lot of ways because it's impacting everything. It's just a matter of resilience and how we move forward now.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I feel you. It's just weird trying to navigate the business side of the industry during these weird times because of, tariffs and all this stupid shit that's hitting the freaking every business, really. It's not just the tattoo business. I mean, it's every business in the United States pretty much that's being negatively affected by tariffs right now.
Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people realize. A lot of people have fear revolving around it because of where they get their information from. But I don't think they understand the magnitude of how those things are going to impact the industry in a micro level with, like, even if products are produced in America, that doesn't mean that the products required to manufacture aren't produced elsewhere. So there's these little micro and macro things that are going to have an impact. As to what that impact's going to be, only time will tell. But, I mean, from your perspective as a product producer, as opposed to, like, the boots on the ground artists who are still, like, actively just consuming the product, it is going to have some sort of lag or negative impact in a way. It's just a matter of what happens thereafter. Like, you have way more insight than most people on how it happens because we can't do what we do if people like yourself are not doing what you need to do, so getting that information out.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say I'm an expert to some degree, but not, there's probably people specifically in the industry that are way more deeply and negatively impacted than I am, especially when you start looking at like the corporate guys, the guys that have like hundreds of millions of dollars on the line in this thing. I think it's probably trickier for those guys to try to navigate through this than it is for someone like me because my China footprint isn't as big as theirs.
Yeah.
Some of those guys depend heavily on China manufacturing for a lot of their business. And so if these 145% tariffs stick, which it doesn't look like they're going away anytime soon. Yeah. I mean, how do they navigate through that? I mean, you essentially can't do business in the United States under those kind of tariffs. I mean, there's just no way. Nobody's going to pay that kind of money for. I mean, if you have to start paying $80 for a box of needles, what are you going to do as an artist? You know what I mean? Yeah. Across the board. I mean, if all the needles are priced like that, what's your solution? Are you gonna up your tattoo rates in a climate that's already financially strapped anyways? I mean, people aren't spending money on tattoos like they were 2 years ago already. So you're already faced with those kind of challenges as an artist. Some artists. Now, some artists are still out there thriving for sure.
Yeah.
But then you have the contrast to that where some artists are really struggling to try to get business through the door. And they're already cutting their rates, or they're doing other things to try to drum up business that they wouldn't typically have to do. So then when you compound that stress with inflated costs of supplies, now what do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, do you think the conversation is more because obviously those are things we can't adjust present day. So do you think the conversation should revolve around the artists and how they work on themselves, how they target a specific clientele market that works more specifically for them, so that they can keep a more of a watchful eye on their overhead, the kind of clients they can work with, so that they know the price brackets their quality of work and quality of experience can truly service?
sure. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a key factor in all of it for sure, So, which is kind of why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because with what you're doing out there with the Force of Focus, and I see a lot of other people doing similar things, which I'm kind of not really clear on. Yours is more clear than some other people's. I feel like you have a pretty consistent platform. Your marketing's pretty consistent. You're not jumping all over the place with things. I think you have it dialed in pretty well, it seems to be. But I'm still kind of curious to know, like, because I see a lot of it, there's several guys that I know personally that are doing similar things with like mentoring other artists or trying to teach people how to market themselves better or just attract higher end clientele like you're talking about, So specifically, I thought it would be interesting to get you on the podcast just to because you've been doing this for a while. I traced it back. I went on your Instagram. This goes all the way back to 2022. So you've been doing this for a minute now,
Yeah.
building this brand for yourself for a while. So it's like, what motivated you to do that? What's your background in as a tattoo artist? How long have you been in the industry? Like, what point in your career did you have this light bulb moment where you decided, hey, I'm going to come out from behind the machine a little bit and start trying to dial in with other artists and just try to relate to people that feel like I feel at this moment in time and bring them along on this journey with me, and kind of what started all that for you?
Um, so this all kind of comes back. I'd like to attach it to a conversation you and I had when I first reached out to you, and you said, it's really just all about being a good person. And that's how the Force of Focus came to be. I've been tattooing for about 21 years. In the first 15 years of my career, I struggled with the same things artists struggle with now. I was just kind of an idea. I wore the cloak of the tattoo artist. I really didn't know who it was I was behind the badge. And I like to compare it to the Wizard of Oz concept of pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. So many artists prioritize what being a tattoo artist is, what expectations others have of them, that they neglect who it is they need to become to make a sustainable career. The cool part about being a tattoo artist is you're in control of your schedule. You don't have a boss to answer to in the grand scheme of things. But if you're not your own boss, then you're living a life without a light. You're just wandering around in the darkness hoping to land where you dream of being, but you have no guidance. There's no lighthouse. There's no roadmap. There's no compass. You have no organization. And so I was the cartoon character. I was the alcoholic, the drug addict, the dude who chased chicks, the late nights, late starts, absolutely no preparation. I just met that rock star attitude. And that wasn't sustainable, man. My options were death or growth. And I chose the latter. I went through a lot of hard times, and it was all I blamed everyone else, everything else for why I was where I was until I started taking accountability and responsibility for the actions that I was taking. And so personal development. Self-development, personal realization, personal reflection is where it all started. The Force of Focus, as a name, started because I had to force my actual focus into something aside from just a badge.
Right.
The focus started with me working with other creatives, not even tattoo artists specifically, but other creatives who struggled with substance abuse issues, alcoholism, drug addiction, or just a lot of negative self-talk and limiting beliefs. It was all mindset. And what I realized was, as I showcased who it was I was as a person more so, I started getting a lot more clients who related to me as an individual just by knowing that they could sit down and have a conversation with me. I realized when I got to know them better, now all of a sudden it was a good marketing strategy because I understood the buyer psychology. And I was no longer worried about content creation to match the algorithm gods. I was just documenting who it was I was, along with the art I was able to express once I created that clarity. And it was this snowball effect of all of it. It wasn't always this. But it all started with me having to prioritize what I needed as an individual once I took the tattoo badge off.
Yeah, that's cool. So now that's grown, obviously, right? You're continuing to grow that.
Yep.
Hopefully on a daily basis, you're growing that. But how much focus, sorry for the pun there, but how much focus has that taken away from your actual tattooing now? Like, is that becoming more of a predominant force in your life than tattooing?
Not necessarily. I tattoo 4 days a week, full time, 8-hour days. I still worry about my own schedule. I still prioritize my client experience as much as anyone else does. And I think what's cool about what we've been able to create is the force of focus isn't a primary income for me. It's not my passive income stream. I sincerely value what it is we get to do in other artists' lives. I can't be successful if they're not. Where I know there's a lot of people who they do the mentoring and the coaching in every field, not just this one, to create passive income streams for themselves. Where I have a large enough team, I take very little off the back end. And I brought other people into the community to be leadership who have zones of genius that can guide their particular ship. So it's not just me, it's myself, it's Steve, it's Joe, it's Jared, and we help people with everything we specialize in. I get to get back to personal development, organization, time management, resilience, and everybody else can do their stuff so they have access to people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So you've got a whole team there behind the scenes. So a lot of people don't really realize that. I think when people are, for sure, when I'm looking at social media, I see a lot of people creating content, and I'm like, man, how do people have time to do all that stuff? And even when I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm like, how do you have time to do tattooing 4 days a week, plus making all this content, plus you got a family, you got one kid, or you got more?
Yeah, just one. I started late.
Yeah, so you got your hands full in a lot of different places, so it's like, that's a lot of time commitment. You definitely got to have some kind of a structure of organization there under you to be able to manage your time properly and get all that stuff done effectively. Because I think where a lot of people fail a lot is they try to focus on too much stuff at once. And I like what you said, where you're like, I got these people that are experts at these different things, and I know where I'm good at. I focus here. They focus on their expertise, and that's what makes the magic work.
Yeah.
I think that's a key takeaway there, because that's probably in general what a lot of tattoo shops are missing, just from a basic foundational standpoint. That lack of clarity and organization, even in business, like we struggle with that in our business, everybody's wearing multiple hats day to day. And it's like, there's some days where you get up and you're like, I'm not even sure what I'm getting into today.
Yep.
And you go to work with the mentality that you're going to do one thing. And then when you get there, you kind of get the rug pulled out from under you, and you're like, oh shit, I gotta adjust on the fly, because now I gotta turn my attention to this, because now I can't worry about this. I got to worry about this. And then I'm stressed out trying to figure out how to get it done the right way. And yeah, I like your approach there. That's a good takeaway, because I think that kind of answers my question in regards to, like, well, what's different about what you're doing versus what everybody else is doing out there?
Yeah, I learned a valuable way. I don't claim to know everything, so I choose consciously not to speak on it. I don't need to have a million different programs to service everyone. I just need to have one really solid community with the right people where you can get all of the information that you need. When it comes to leadership training, I do leadership training and coaching for other industries solely because we have to start with the individual. You can't be a quality leader unless you can build sincere trust and you can be predictable in that leadership role. So we have to implement certain things into our lives that can make us predictable so that people know no matter what happens, you're a person they can rely on and believe in. And that's something I think we lack in the tattoo industry in a lot of different ways because we go so hard on the paint on the tattoo thing that the rest of our lives are extremely frantic, urgent, uncertain, or unclear, which is kind of why we came into it in the first place, to do the pirate thing.
Right.
But even pirates had to eventually like they had to implement new strategies to be able to navigate.
Right.
And it's brought me a lot of joy, but to be able to create the reputation that I have, to be able to work with other people who are in the industry, have been in the industry, and have actually created additional businesses from the superpower that being a tattooer truly is, has been so cool. When people reach out to me and I don't have to knock on everybody's door to try to get like their time of day, I never expected this to be the case. I really just came in here because I wanted to help people break through where it was they were stuck. And that's all that mattered to me. And still we can do that. And we can do it at capacity now because it's not just me. If it was me, I would bottleneck the business, lose out on my own life. My son would never see me. But because we've been able to do this, resources are present and artists are growing, and it's really cool to be a part of. I don't believe the force of focus is just me. It's all of us.
Now, are these people on your team, are these other artists in your shop, or just are they industry people? Are they people outside the industry?
Everything. And so we have Steve Johns, who was a marketing chief officer for Board Riders years ago. So he worked with like Hurley, Billabong, Quicksilver, and people have access to him to do full branding packages, logos, mood boards, icons, the whole thing. Joe Swanson, who I think
Yeah.
So he's doing our compass call, which is business structure, strategy, innovation, infrastructure, and we actually are paralleling the growth of the tattoo industry in comparison to other industries because the tattoo industry is still in the fertile stages of growth, all things considered. So we can predict the transitions that are going to occur before they do, just based on comparing and contrasting other things that have happened in parallel industries. And then our good buddy Jared, who actually came into the force as someone who was learning under us, and he really just brought crazy levels of value when it comes to financial literacy, financial psychology, investment opportunities, how to be able to utilize your money so that your money can actually work for you. And so it's not so much about teaching artists how to save money properly, but it's save money properly and invest with intelligence and understand your risk threshold, so that you're eventually putting money towards something that will build your future.
Yeah, that's cool. When I started the business of tattooing, my focus was more geared towards that financial side of things because kind of like I realized at a certain point in my career that what was really lacking in my personal database was that financial responsibility piece, right? And so I was like, man, I got to get money smart, because I'm going to need money later in life, and I got to really start thinking about this. Like, what should I be doing with my money? And it's funny because I always trace that back to my youth when I was a kid. My grandpa would give me allowance, and if he'd give me $1, he'd always put $1 in my hand, like 4 quarters, and then he would take 2 quarters back out of my hand, and I'd be like, "Why are you taking my money?" And he's like, "'Cause you need to save half of your money." Like, yep. He's like, "I'm going to put this half in the bank for you, and then when you have a big emergency or you want to make a large purchase, you'll have cash to buy it with instead of having to go borrow money to do things." And so my grandpa kind of was teaching me financial literacy really early on in life without me even realizing it. But I realized as I got older, I didn't really carry that forward so much. I'd get $100 and go spend $100. You know what I mean? At some point, that lesson kind of fell away, and I had to remind myself about it, and I had to get back on track with that. And so when I started the business of tattooing, I was like, I'm pretty financially smart. I really don't know a lot of artists that are really thinking about their future so much. So I should write, I should use my platform in Skin and Ink magazine to really write about my financial life lessons and teach artists how to be more financially savvy, how to invest in stocks and bonds and things like that to be able to set some money aside for later on in life. So I think that's cool that you're doing that, because it is a very weak area for. I just had this conversation with somebody the other day, another artist friend of mine, and we were talking about this subject, and we were like, it's crazy because tattoo artists aren't really business people. They're artists. They know how to create art, and they're creative minds. And most creative minds are messy minds. You know what I mean? In my experience, it's like, it's a chaotic space upstairs between your ears, So it's like trying to make sense out of all that business stuff is just not something we're really energetic about or even really want to focus on. It's just like mundane bullshit that we don't really even care about, but it's stuff that we got to care about. So I think it's cool that that's a piece of your puzzle, because it's an important one, I feel like.
Yeah. The one thing that I learned is, if you go back to all of us in school, we were always the kids that heard, your son or daughter's talented, they just don't apply themselves. Insert tattoo career here. That's exactly still what it is, and I realized that I was the same way. My ability of focus, it sincerely had to be forced. But what were my options? Tattooing is still one of the only careers where you can walk in with no plan and leave with $1,000. And you already have something in your head, because we don't understand the value in investment, because everything becomes an expense. It's all money in, money out, when money's so readily handed to us. And then as the industry itself expanded, and as people became more drawn to doing it as a career because of the lifestyle that was perceived, all of a sudden the cash in hand started minimizing a little bit more and a little bit more. And then people just fell to their lowest strength, which in a lot of cases was a weakness, because we were so used to just the stuff and the things and the immediate gratification that we hadn't set ourselves up. So I love the idea of saving, because I was always bad at it. The one thing I learned about myself was my risk threshold, my risk tolerance is sky high, because I was that guy. However, with the right tools in place, I can utilize my risk tolerance to a crazy level to set myself up for further success.
Mm-hmm.
That same risk threshold of throwing all my money out the window can equally be as implemented into setting myself up for success, as long as I have the right vision in mind. No different than my alcoholism. I'm still the same guy I used to be. I just re-implemented my obsession. I don't obsess with this, but I obsess with this. And all I had to do was readjust where my focus was and create a really significant thing that I needed, figure out how important it was to me, and give it a really defining reason why, and all of a sudden my blinders are on, and I'm driven towards achieving that goal. And I get to be as psychopathic and as crazy as every other tattoo artist out there. I'm just targeted.
Right. Well, that's good. I want to kind of go back a little bit to where you were talking about, is it a matter of artists targeting the right clientele, right? Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about that, because it kind of ties into what you're just talking about here. How big is your shop? How many artists do you have? Because you have a pretty decent sized shop, right?
Yeah, we have 9 artists, a piercer, and an assistant.
And your shop's called
Legacy Tattoo and Art Co. in Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay, cool. Should throw that out there so people know.
Yeah.
But so 9 artists. Let's talk about your business. Is it thriving? Is every artist in there busy? How's it looking?
Yeah, no, we're doing really well. I lucked out to have a best friend who was also a tattoo artist who believed in me when I was still a nightmare. So he and I opened Legacy together during the pandemic. And that worked really well for us, because when everybody else was afraid of their shadows, we made a large investment and had a negotiation strategy to bring our square footage price point down to something that worked really well for us, and we locked in. Since then, we've been able to expand an additional 1,800 square feet into the back end to create more of a private experience room. Every artist there has all of the tools and resources that we provide in the Force of Focus, plus like boots on the ground application and accessibility. We even as a studio partnered with Tattoo Pro as well to be able to simplify the front and the back end of the business. So the nice part is we get to work with a lot of dreamers who have no other option but to be forced to work around me and Brock. And both of us are we're very driven individuals because of the experiences we previously had.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many other shops are there in your area? Do you have a lot of competition there?
Yeah, it's a saturated market, no different than everywhere else. I don't think anything is oversaturated because people turn 18 every day.
Right.
What I believe is that if tattoo shops don't understand the fact that they have to have their own offer, their own individuality, their own uniqueness, then everybody's fighting over the same scraps. So for a very saturated market, we have been able to stand out amongst the masses solely because of the reason we had opened in the first place. We named it Legacy for 2 reasons. Brock had a daughter and a son who were amazing artists and individuals, and his legacy was them. I didn't have a kid at the time, so my legacy was going to be the impact I could have on my community through community outreach, charity work, and educating creativity and arts to kids.
Okay.
And so because of that, we target a different market. You know, so again, it goes back to the being selfless from a place most people wouldn't see themselves entering. You know, we as a studio, and anybody who listens to this, I recommend it. Don't worry so much about yourself and where you can go. Do more for your community, and your business position will skyrocket solely because of your ability to give back. Like it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful feeling, and you're really positioning yourself to be the shop that everyone wants to enter, so you can break the stigma of why they haven't entered it so far.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that because that's like a key focus for me in my business right now, especially because it's funny to sit here and think about like the other night I was thinking like, man, I got this whole life outside of tattooing that nobody even knows. You know what I mean? It's like people just see me and they think the brand that I'm associated with or tattooing, you know what I mean? And when I encounter people, it's all they want to talk about. But I have this whole other life outside of that, as do you and everyone else that's a tattoo artist, you know, but we never talk about those things. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm actually doing a community event tomorrow with other business leaders in the area, you know? So it's like, I do all these things and it's not people that are even in the tattoo industry. It's people that own RV companies or restaurants or what, you know, it's just other business leaders that you get together with once a month and you kind of like, just talk about how their business is doing and brainstorm and strategize and just things like that. So, but the community piece is a key thing because we've been talking about that a lot at Electrum, you know, internally. Like we had closed our showroom down during COVID and it just kind of collected inventory up there and it just became a storage room, right? And so we never even opened it back up. Well, we just reopened it, but we've been having all these conversations about, hey, we really need to utilize this space as a community gathering space, you know, like how do we basically turn this into a beacon that attracts tattoo artists to us, right? Like what kind of community events can we do to bring the community to us and help drive awareness to who we are and what we're doing in the community, you know? So I like that, man. I think it's really cool hearing you say all this because I had no idea all these things that were a piece of your Force of Focus thing. You know, I just see your Instagram stuff and it doesn't even do justice to the real story behind all of it, you know? So it's really cool hearing you, all those pieces that you have assembled there. And even the fact that you've brought these people from outside the industry in to that, you know, like that's cool. Like, how does that even, that's community right there, you know? So how does that happen? You know, like what kind of things are you involved in your community outside of the tattoo space?
So there's a lot. Personally, I'm a huge component of whether it's spirituality or faith, family unity. and everyone else in our community, like who's in leadership, truly is. I'm a firm believer in vertical networking outside of the industry, only to refine what it is we do within.
Right.
So I'm still a component or an advocate of investing in mentorship everywhere I can with people who I align with, not just what they built in the business, but who it is they genuinely are as people. Because if our only social circle or networking circle is what we have in house, then we're only going to continuously do the same things we've always done. So most of my interactions, most of my fun with friends is on Zoom calls. I'm flying out to Utah to hang out with Keaton Hoskins, his wife, and they're doing a marriage mastermind. I love that. You know what I mean? We just got back from Cabo with Keaton and Rob Bailey and his wife doing similar things, just enjoying new experiences, talking business. But here's the important part about that every tattoo artist should know. You have a zone of genius that every business entrepreneur does not have, and that is your ability of thinking outside the box. The skills that they have and have had to master to make their businesses successful can always find more value in a person who has creativity that they can implement into everything they do in their lives if they're willing to implement that creativity in other things aside from just tattoos. And that's where my values come into with working outside of the industry in so many different ways. I want to be able to bring what it is we do, the zones of genius that we have as artists, into first our lives and then into the lives of others. No different than you. A lot of what makes you significant and valuable to a lot of the other businesses you work with is the individual traits you've been able to master through tattooing in general, and then building into a much larger business. And I think every artist has that. And I'm going to say it, we are God gifted a superpower to be able to express our creativity in a certain way. I think everyone was put on this planet with a specific level of creativity. It's a matter of where we implement it. But we have chosen this path.
Right.
And if we can find how to implement that creativity into everything else that we do, our value as just individuals excels further than we could have ever imagined. So if I imagine we get, let's say, hundreds of people into the Force of Focus, and all of those people change 100 lives, then it becomes so much bigger than anything we ever thought. Because we think we're so small for some reason. But every person has the potential of changing a handful of lives, good or bad.
Yeah, you had talked about spirituality a little bit, and I don't want to dive too deep into that, but just a little scratch the surface kind of a conversation. I think it has important context to these things. So I think humans tend to overcomplicate things a lot, right? And spirituality is one of those things that's way overcomplicated for any number of reasons. But at the most basic understanding of the concept, my personal belief is that our purpose as human beings is to help make humanity great, and using our God-given abilities to help evolve our species and help evolve and protect the world. Right now, that's not to say that we're doing a great bang up job of it, because I think historically we fail pretty miserably in that regard. But tying into what you're saying, I think it's good to look at it from that perspective, because really all we should really be focused on is how, like when we opened this conversation, we were talking about how do I be a better person? How do I be the best version of me, right? That's all we should really be focused on, right? And I think we get really bogged down in the weeds trying to figure out all the complicated noise that constantly hits our radar that's tied to those areas of focus, right? It's like my neighbor's wearing a Rolex, or my neighbor's got a swimming pool, or my neighbor's driving a Mercedes and I'm driving a Toyota, and what the hell am I doing wrong with my life? Why's that guy got it so much better than me, or why can't I figure this shit out? I think that's where we where we really lose the scope of the really simple project that we have, right?
Yeah, so a huge component for me is I am a man of faith. Now that doesn't necessarily mean much to anyone else aside from the words that I say. What does mean stuff to other people is the actions I take to follow through with that. You know, we all believe in something, and if it's, I'll say it this way, we're not going to change humanity with opinion, we're going to change humanity with action.
Okay.
And a lot of people think that their opinion is their truth, but actions create the truth. So whatever you take a stance on, have actions that follow, and just become a better you, become a better leader, as we had said, so that we can actually start to change our social circles, our environments, our communities.
So when you rewind the clock back to, you said, I was an alcoholic. I was, not managing my life properly. I was just kind of out of bounds all over the place. You really made a decision, whatever that moment in time was, where you made that decision to say, man, I got to reel this shit in and get my act together. I feel like that's an ever evolving process, right? Even when you think you're doing it right, there's always that seed in the back of your mind that's like, man, am I still missing the mark here? Like, do you still have moments like that, where, and how do you work through those seeds of doubt that are constantly there? They're always there.
The seeds of doubt get bigger as you continuously grow and you make conscious decision. The one thing that I used to do was just allow the universe to figure it out. I wasn't an active advocate of making any decision. I just let life figure it out and I dealt with the consequences, whatever. And what I learned was, as I started making decisions, yes or no decisions, I knew I was not going to make the right one, but at least I was making one. So I could be accountable to the decision that was made, so I could actually learn something from it. Where when I was, we'll say younger, it's really not that long ago in the grand scheme of time, I never learned anything from the lack of decision making. There was no lessons learned. That's the difference between if you're losing or if you're learning. And even though the seeds of doubt get bigger and bigger, so does your ability of self-belief. So, I'm a huge component of the buffalo mindset, where the buffalo is one of the only animals in the animal kingdom who will sense the storm and trudge through it to get to the other side, where most other animals will run and seek shelter and wait for it to pass without a timeline of how long that could potentially take. So as the storms get bigger, I still know I'm running, and I get better at silencing the noise and choosing which voice in my head to listen to. And the more big ticket decisions I make, the louder that voice gets.
So are you actually taking time out of as part of your force of focus, do you actually schedule time with individual artists to have one-on-ones like this with them through Zoom meetings and so that has to take a huge amount of time as well, right? Because I don't understand how you can tattoo 4 days a week and still make that work. That's crazy.
So
mentorship's a huge undertaking.
It is. I'll just give you exactly how I do it. I break my schedule down into red, yellow, green. Red is me time. That's my high energy. Yellow is high performance. That's my workflow. Green is high purpose. That's time with my family to not be tampered with. I do not negotiate on these things. I give people access to my Calendly link for the first 4 to 6 weeks. We get scheduled calls in with myself and other members of leadership. After that, they get access to that Calendly link so that we can do problem solving, system building when it's necessary. Because eventually, you just wind up hanging out on a Zoom call,
right?
So my red time is always for me. I wake up, and this isn't part of my program, so don't worry. I wake up at 3:45 every morning. I spend really, really quality time with myself, in my fitness, in my mental health, in my studies, if I'm going to do some personal art, that's my red time. And I don't get distracted. I have my fancy little timer so that I know everything gets my undivided attention within this time block I give it. When I get into yellow, that is for client art, my lead generation, my social media, my tattoo time. If we have to do a shop meeting, anything like that, if anybody has problems they need to deal with at the shop or as members of the Force of Focus. But I have those boundaries in place. Once it's time to go into green, that's non-negotiable. I have a steady date night every single week with my lady. Phones get left in the car unless she wants to capture one of those really cute pictures that she makes me look good in. Those things. I just don't sacrifice. I'm in complete control of my schedule. Now, there has to be a little bit of fluctuation in that yellow, as if there has to be a crisis that's fixed, navigated, then I can do that because I'm already in a really solid, constant flow. If I nail my red, my yellow is fun. But if I shit the bed on red and I wake up late, I hit the snooze alarm, then the rest of my day feels urgent, frantic, and I get frustrated with stuff. Otherwise, dude, I get to live like a kid with discipline. I know where I need to be. I know what needs my attention. And I just don't make room for the other things.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to approach things. I try to do that a lot myself, but I find myself not being able to stick to it as rigidly, right? Like I say, I'm going to get up at 4:30 every morning and I'm going to go to bed at 9 o'clock every night. But a lot of times what ends up happening is I'm up till midnight and then I can't get my ass out of bed at 4:30 in the morning, right? Yeah. And so that's tough because every day you set the same intention, but that follow through is the hard part, right? The intent. Because sometimes you can't control when you fall asleep. You know, you're gonna sit there in bed like this and you're like, damn it, fall asleep.
You know, the weirdest thing I ever heard was Arnold Schwarzenegger say, if you need to sleep, just sleep faster. And it was like, that doesn't make any sense. That's hilarious. But what wound up happening was, okay, so instead of worrying about what time I'm going to wake up, I worried more about what time I went to bed. You know, because if I made sure I was in bed by 10:30 every night and my alarm went off at 3:45, I didn't have to worry as much about the wake up time because I got the amount of sleep that I needed. It's just, that's where my boundary is. It's so much more focused on bedtime than it is wake up time because I get really good at that. And psychologically, I can perform well on 5 hours of sleep. That's me. It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
But I find that the harder I work through the day and the more fulfilled I become based on the actions that I take, the less I sit up and wonder and stew and doubt. So I don't have to I don't have to work through the mess. My mind's just like, time for sleep. And then it's just done. And I sleep really well. It's crazy.
Yeah, I get it too. I'm a 4 or 5 hour operational guy too, so I get that. That's an easy function for me as well. Yeah. Also, though, I find exercise and diet are super key components to that.
Absolutely.
To that working properly. I mean, you can't load yourself up on shitty food all day. You can't. You got to take care of your mind and your body. I mean. Yep. Also, if you're exercising, you're going to fall asleep and sleep better, easier, anyways, right? But so you have this same rigid routine every single day. I'm up at 4, I'm up at 3:45. From 3:45 to 4:30, I'm journaling, I'm meditating from the next 30 minutes. Is that kind of how your day goes?
Yeah, my calendar's even color coded. So when I look at it, I already know where I need to be. It's fascinating, but even the color coding, I made a planner that even has your color codes. You know what I mean? That's
okay.
And it works. I need to write stuff down also, so I have it in my phone calendar. Plus, I'm writing the stuff down. But yeah, it works really well. And I personally, I have to have personal trainers for my fitness. Every 3 to 6 months, I'll have a different personal trainer that will help change my workout routine, give me a different set of instructions. And I need that for accountability. I know how I am as a person. And if I don't have someone keeping me accountable in that particular thing, then eventually my form will go to shit. My consistency will go to shit. So, again, this goes back into the importance of investing into myself.
Yeah, I get that. That's good. I probably need a personal trainer then, because that might help me some.
Otherwise we just wind up checking the box. You know what I mean? And
Yeah. I mean, I've been going to the gym my whole, well, not my whole life, obviously, but a good portion of my adult life anyways, right? So it's like, I'm one of those guys where I feel like, hey, I don't need somebody telling me how to lift weights. I pretty much know how to do this. I'm pretty successful with that, but it's just like, I do go to the gym and wander around a lot. Like, I don't really have, like, if it's back day, I don't really go to the gym saying, I'm going to do this series of exercises today. I just hit the gym floor and I just go to whatever's open and I just do my sets and then I bounce to the next thing until I feel like I've got a good workout in. I mean, that's kind of how I do it, but it's just, it's effective enough, but it's not as effective as it could be for sure,
Yeah. The one thing I learned by working with trainers was mind to muscle and how important that was. And then again, when you think outside the box, if you can implement your same mind to muscle practice with the intention of putting your mind in the muscle, making sure that you're isolating your delt or your lats, imagine doing that into the way that you tattoo. Imagine doing that into the way that you interact with your kids, into the way that you court your significant other,
Yeah.
And it's your mind into that thing and create the intention. And that's where my level of I'm on the spectrum, and so I need to have intention. I need to have diligent thought. Otherwise, I'm everywhere. I have this. If most of the time I have 1,000 half-built bridges, none of which take me anywhere. So if I have my mind to the mission that I'm on, then I can have one bridge with the same amount of attention that will take me everywhere I could ever imagine being. But if I don't have, going back to what it is I really want, the importance of it, and the reason why, then again, I go back to just having a shit ton of half-built bridges and no fulfillment at all. So I think artists struggle with that. We dabble in a lot of things, none of which provide us with like significant results.
Yeah. How does mental health play into the Force of Focus? Do you guys focus on that kind of stuff a lot? Do you talk about it a lot?
That's my primary thing. Because no different than you can't be mentally healthy if you're not physically healthy. Your nutrition, your hydration, your physical activity play a huge component to a lot of these things. Your mental health is a huge player in everything you do and the things you believe that you can do, And so one of the calls that I personally host is Flagship. We talk a lot about our mental wellness. We talk a lot about our mental belief systems, our limiting beliefs, how to alleviate a lot of the doubt that we have. And I heard once upon a time Bedros Keuilian say that confidence is simply making a promise and keeping a promise. And it was like, that makes it seem so much easier. And that makes a lot of sense. Think about all the promises you broke to yourself since you were a kid. They started small, they got bigger, but you got good at it. You got really good at manipulating yourself to believe it wasn't important now, but you'd get around to it.
Right.
And if you can just simply make one promise to yourself and keep that promise and then just rinse and repeat, your confidence will come back.
Yeah, I think that's key. Again, it's that overcomplication of things, right? It's constantly having to remind yourself to just simplify your thought process.
Yeah.
So it's cool. So it's interesting, who are some people that inspire you? Like what I mean, I'm really curious to know like where that light bulb moment was for you that was out. I mean, you had to hear somebody else was going through some shit and you saw like a turnaround story in their lives maybe inspired you or something like that? Or are there key figures because there's a ton of motivational people out there, right? You got like David Goggins and Tony Robbins and like all these obvious big name guys out there. But then under that, you got a ton of other people that are motivational people, like who are some people that inspire you and motivate you?
So there's one person who has been active in my life since the day I started trying to change. There was a gentleman named Matthew Coder. He was kind of a spiritual coach and a yoga instructor of mine. And no matter how hard things got, no matter how much I struggled to get it right, no matter how bad it got, he was always there and still continues to be. And that was something that I didn't have a lot of through my life, or at least I didn't allow a lot in my life. And he's a very inspirational dude. He's really got a really creative viewpoint of just who it is we are, and the same conversations you and I are having. And he's always there. He's still to this day bi-weekly check-ins, and this has been going on for 5-6 years now. And that was big for me. But then when it comes to people that I work with currently, is if I see somebody who has something that I value in their own personal traits, what it is they were able to create, I sincerely just go out and invest in working with them no matter what the cost. I work with Rob Bailey, who owns Flag Nor Fail and does Rob Bailey and the Hustle Standard. His wife is Dana Lynn Bailey, who was Miss Olympia. And we work with them one-on-one now, where my fiance and I are doing a lot of coaching for couples to create individual goal sets, to be able to create a unified goal set, to be able to actually move together and align their lives instead of feeling as if they're drifting apart. And we partnered with them to bring in the DLB Daily app that she has for fitness. So everyone who works with us gets access to that as well, to make sure that everyone actually has a fitness regimen they can maintain, and to know how to utilize our structured schedule and organization to make it something they can actually do. How many times do people say, I just don't have the time?
Right.
It's just the edit and the audit. Keaton Hoskins, known as the muscle on the show The Diesel Brothers, has been another active member in my growth, in my life, a really great source for me to go to be able to alleviate a lot of those seeds of doubt. Even though I can overcome it, does that mean I can create a path from it? Not unless I'm working with people who are going to be active components to the direction that I want to go. So many people. And I sincerely, I'm obsessed with investment. I love to increase my social circle and my networking capabilities. And so I work with the people I admire. Whatever it takes, I make sure that I get to know a little bit more about them, and I just go all in.
No, yeah, that's cool, man. So I think really I've got a pretty clear picture now, because when I was sitting here thinking about the podcast, and I was like, what am I going to get into with Mikey, and what are we going to talk about? And obviously the force of focus was going to be a area of focus for the discussion. But again, I wanted to really understand, what is it that sets the force of focus apart from other tattoo mentorship type programs? And I think I've got a pretty clear understanding of that now. And it's really that the force of focus isn't necessarily singularly a tattoo mentorship program. It's a personal mentorship program geared towards tattoo artists more than anything, but you're way more focused on things that are outside of the realms of actual machining your hand, tattoo, bring clients through the door kinds of things. You're really invested in who the person is behind the tattoo machine and how to help them improve their lives overall, not just in their artistic journey.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One thing that I've always liked to say is, let's take the tattoo badge off, give the attention to the individual. Because if you really think about it, quality client acquisition isn't a goal, it's a byproduct. You don't just find a really cool marketing strategy that'll get them. You have to show up and be that person they want to work with. Otherwise, you're just kind of I don't want to say scamming because it's such a niche term, but when you have a marketing strategy that speaks to a particular client, that client buys, then they show up and you're not the person that they were hoping they'd get to work with, that ruins your reputation, that ruins your credibility. So become that person. If you want to work with a better client, become a better individual. If you have a luxury product, you want to work with luxury clients, become a luxury person, and all of a sudden you have the system. And so can you make a shit ton of money tattooing? You bet. Is it sustainable? Not unless you are. Can you work with amazing clients as client acquisition? Sure. Can you create client retention? Not unless you're the one who they really want to like dedicate themselves to. You know, so when everybody says, well, it's a luxury product, the economy, this, that, and the other thing, absolutely couldn't agree more. But for a luxury product, if you believe what you do is produce a luxury product, can you create a luxury experience for a luxury consumer as a luxury provider? Now it's not going to be as hard of a pill to swallow.
Yeah, I like that perspective. It's good having this conversation because you use the word scammy, and honestly, I feel like that sometimes when I'm scrolling through and I see a lot of these mentorship type of things. You know what I mean? I'm like, and specific to the tattoo industry in general. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I look at them sometimes and I'm like, man, is this guy, and not to you particularly, but just in general, when I see some of this stuff, I'm just like, is this person just can't cut it with their tattoo career now? They're trying to find a way to just make residual income. I like the fact that when we started this conversation, you said, this isn't a residual income stream for me. You know, I'm doing this because this is what really feeds my soul and what provides me with my purpose, more or less, right? I think that's the right reasons to do things in life. You know, this kind of ties into what we were talking about when we were having that spirituality conversation. You know, like, our basic need is to fill the needs of others. I mean, that's really, if that's not what we're focused on as humans, I don't feel like we're doing the right things as humans. You know, once you step outside the box of that, you can go in all kinds of different directions and you can start feeding your ego and all these selfish needs that your ego has. Mm-hmm. But before you get to that stage, I mean, if your purpose isn't to serve other people, then your purpose isn't a selfless purpose, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty basic thing, but the fact that you said the things that you said just kind of lets me know that it's not that, you know what I mean? And also the fact that you've put so much, like I said, I didn't realize you had all these other people behind the scenes that aren't even part of, and you got some real powerhouse people back there, you know what I mean? Like that, you got some big, powerful people with some really tuned in focuses on your team. So, I mean, you've definitely put a lot into this for sure. So that's really cool. And definitely, like I said, sets you apart for sure in my mind.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about tattooing though, since this is the business of tattooing, you know?
Yeah.
How much of your client base is tattoo artists? Do you have clients that are not tattoo artists as well?
I do. It's a little more rare because, like I said, I have to be a little bit more tuned in with my schedule and what kind of time I have. But yeah, I work with people who sincerely they want to create what it is I've been able to produce in my life. And even here locally in Des Moines, like I have people who reach out to me all the time who want to know what it is that I've done, what it is I went through. I'm vulnerable and open about the story that I've lived, because I don't think people understand what it is they're capable of accomplishing. And it's not just tattoo artists, but the community itself, the Force of Focus, primarily tattoo artists. But yeah, I work with people who just need help. You know, I think we as tattoo artists are in a position to get respect from everyone. You know, who's the one person a rock star looks up to? A tattoo artist.
Right.
And so I've worked with some pretty amazing people both in and outside of the tattoo industry. And so we are a little bit more particular. It's just a matter of where they are, because I'm really quick to tell people no. You know, because again, it's not about the money, it's about the impact that we can create. So I'm as easily open to telling people no and putting them in someone else's guidance, mentorship, or to give any recommendations as I am to bring them in knowing that they're in a position to be willing and ready to actually make the changes. We brought people in for the wrong reasons. You know, where we brought them in, they were persistent, they were consistent until they got in and just wanted the golden ticket and didn't do any of the stuff.
The business of tattooing is brought to you by Electrum Supply, the industry leader in high quality tattoo supplies designed by artists for artists. Whether you need premium stencil products, top-tier cartridges, or game-changing aftercare, Electrum has you covered with innovative, artist-tested solutions you can trust. Want to elevate your work? Head over to electrumsupply.com and stock up on the best gear in the business. And because you're a listener of the Business of Tattooing, use code podcast10 at checkout for 10% off your next order. Stay sharp, stay stocked, and stay ahead with Electrum Supply. So most of the content that I see you creating is like you have your tattoo machine in your hand and you're talking this motivational stuff while you're tattooing.
Yeah.
Is that because that's where it fits into your schedule? Like, this is the zone where I got to do this at? This is where it fits in the time today?
For two reasons. One, yeah, because it's easier for my schedule to do. And two, because I realized that for a long time, I just seemed like a guy sitting in a dungeon giving great advice with nothing relatable about me. People didn't know I tattooed.
Okay.
You know? Because
Yeah.
it was just me in this room, so they had no idea.
With the force of is this where you shoot all your stuff at right here?
Yeah.
Is that got the neon sign behind you right there?
That's over in the corner now.
Oh, okay. Okay. I like that backdrop. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we rebranded. I've got a new office space that I'm moving into so that I can be even more focused in a separate office space. I'm in my house here because when I get breaks, I can go upstairs, be a dad for
Sure.
like little 30-minute windows, play with the dog, hang out with the lady.
Sure. So since you're doing a lot of this while you're tattooing, how many of your clients are like, oh man, I could use some of this in my life? You know, does that happen a lot?
They love it. So, some of my clients get in on the conversations, which one thing that I want to do is I have a lot of amazing clients that I get to work with. And I want to start recording a podcast with some of them where we go over, the meaning of the tattoo, who it is they are, and get a little bit more into that. You see a lot of tattoo podcasts about the tattoo process, tattoo podcast for tattoo artists. What about creating a tattoo podcast for tattoo consumers? To show people what truly goes into the connection, the relatability, and the experience of a tattoo.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And so we're going to start going a little bit more that direction. And I put it out on my tattoo page, and I had hundreds of people like, yep. And so I already have this surplus of clients that know how I communicate, know how the conversations go, because it's not just content. That's how I am. Like, that's how I talk usually. And so a lot of them, we just have really good, profound conversations. And so I thought maybe open up those parameters a little bit.
No, that's good, because I actually had Joe Capp on the podcast last week, and he was talking about like he feels like the industry is going more towards a generation of artists that is just like going to want to put their headphones on and not really interact with their clients very much. And the world does kind of feel like that in general these days. Like, there's just I think social media has done a lot to kind of take away from the human interaction piece of society. And I do feel like it's probably going to get worse over time. So that's a cool concept to do that, because you could actually, just mic your station up and just like shoot that kind of a podcast while you're tattooing your client and get their little story right there while you're, talking about the tattoo that you're doing in the flesh right there. That's a really, really cool idea. I never thought about that. That would be I think that would do really well, actually.
I'm excited to see how it goes, because I have a wily cast of clients, and they all come from way different places. If the clients are flying in, usually they're high achievers. If they're in-house local clients, I tattoo just people from all walks of life, and to be able to hear their stories, what this tattoo means to them, the connectability between me and them. I don't want to make it about, well, what made me the ideal artist you chose? But the experience that I provide plays a huge component.
Right.
And I think it positions clients to know what to look for in a quality provider of a product and an experience. It gives artists the opportunity of knowing what it is they can do differently in their practices, in their standard operating procedures to attract better quality clients. So it kind of does like cover a couple bases.
Well, it also covers the fact that people that don't have a tattoo yet are very intimidated by the thought and process of getting a tattoo. I mean, tattoo studios are still very taboo places even in today's society. You know what I mean? It's not like walking into a coffee shop. You know, it's not that same it mentally in people's minds. It's just not that same kind of an experience. You know, the average person is generally scared when they walk into a tattoo shop. They don't know the right questions to ask. And as artists, we experience it all the time. You know, people come in with these ideas that are unrealistic, that don't make a lot of sense, that don't fit the anatomy of where they want it, right? I mean, there's a whole learning curve that goes into being a tattoo client that people just don't know. So I think even from that aspect, you're right. I mean, I think that's a hugely beneficial thing, a podcast for the collector. You know what I mean? That's outside the box thinking. That's smart.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean,
Yeah.
the cool part about it is anybody can do it. If 100 people that listen to your podcast steal this idea, it will not negatively impact my business whatsoever. You know, so having more people doing it in their local communities and having their clients show it, I mean, trigger the trade, free game, as the kids would say. Collaborate with your clients. If you want more clients who are similar to your favorite clients, collaborate your posts about their tattoos with them so it shows up on their page.
Yeah.
You know, and so you start doing this podcast, that only gives you more fuel to be able to be showcased more often. And then you go into their social circles to be seen as the artist who's providing this experience and this art. Now you're expanding your visibility in social circles that can afford your product, have similar interests as the client that you worked with, and it just does better for your business and for your outreach.
Yeah, that's valuable. I mean, that's a valuable piece of information. And yeah, I'm sure some people are probably going to try to steal that from you. But hey, it's way better than the advice I give people. I'm just like, hey, go stick your business cards in egg crates at the store. You know?
Both and, you know, they both work.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. So let's talk about tattooing a little bit. How much attention do you pay to the industry in general? You said you've been in for 20 plus years, you know, so you've seen the evolution of tattooing, to some degree. How do you feel about tattooing today? How do you think it's looking? How do you think the future of tattooing looks? You know, what are your thoughts on AI? We can hit all kinds of things.
I don't pay very close attention to what everyone believes the industry is. I think that we've utilized the term industry for as long as I can remember, yet now that's what it is. You know, now there are tiers to it. Nobody really knows how high it goes. And what I pay attention to are other industries to know how to implement it into this. I kind of like where the industry's headed, shy of all of the fear and turmoil going on with tariffs and products and stuff like that. I know it's going to make for hard times, but I think from an artist perspective, it positions us to be obligated to be more professional. You and I have had conversations about professionalism, breaking old stigmas, what it is we can do to be better people, to provide a better product and a better experience so that people can build trust around what it is we do, who it is we are, so we can break down a lot of those walls that have been built around us because of old practices that were pretty prevalent. So I think because of the way it's going, it's almost going to become mandatory, where shitty artists, bad practices, and just bad people are going to be pushed back into the shadows because there's going to be a lot more limelight on us from not only an artist to artist level, but from a federal level. I do think that eventually here soon, they're going to start to implement things like boards like they do with massage therapists and registered nurse practitioners into the tattoo industry to have a bit more of a watchful eye over how things are being done, and for no other reason other than federal regulations and more money going in that direction. But to a degree, I think as tattooing has expanded, there's been a lot less specificity to how apprenticeships are being done, which is why there's a big problem. So no one knows the right information. They just get kind of brushed along for whatever purpose. And I think that's why there's going to be a lot more regulations. I love it because it's requiring all of us to be more professional, better people, and to know that as creatives, we have no other option but to take shit seriously finally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know, man. Like, I loved the life that I got to lead. Like, looking back on it in hindsight, like, I had a lot of fun as a nightmare. But you know what's more fun than being a problem? Being a fucking solution. You know, and I think we all have the opportunity to be quality leaders just for our clients.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to touch on one thing you said before I hit my next point, but you said that we don't really know how high the tattoo industry goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean specifically? What do you mean? What is that?
Well, how quick did it become like a $2.8 billion industry from pandemic on? You know, for what reason? Who's invested in it? Where did the expansion occur? And how far out do the branches really spiderweb?
Right.
You know, and they're already projecting it to go from, I believe it was like 2.8 to 4.8 or 9 in the next 4 to 5 years. How can they project that number aside from analytics or knowing where investments based on corporate entities are going to come from?
Yeah, so I think I can touch on that a little bit, but I don't even think I really understand the true magnitude of it either. I think there's a lot of theory, speculation, and a lot of conspiracy mindsets around the subject, right? It's like, like one that I hear pretty commonly is that, you know, and trust me, federal oversight's already here. I mean, it's been here. It's prevalent. Unfortunately, I'm forced to be deeply involved in it today. Both good and bad. I mean, there's good sides to that and bad sides. The bad side is just the time commitment, really. The good side is the education that you walk away from with it, because I've learned so much more about tattooing from federal oversight and their perspectives on things, right? And what the and I'm not talking the actual process of tattooing. When I'm talking about tattooing, I'm generally talking about it from the business perspective of tattooing, right? What goes on behind the curtain in the industry that most artists don't really understand, right? And so I'm fortunate enough to be involved on both sides of it to get a better picture of that. But I don't really even know I don't really know what's driving that ship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the fear and speculation part of it. It's like you'll hear all the time, like, well, it's like these big cosmetic, you know, they saw that this industry's making $3 billion a year, and now they want to get a piece of it. So they're trying to put regulations in place to drive the smaller guys out so they can take over and they can own this supply side of it and the manufacturing product part of it. But I don't know if that's true or not. You know what I mean? I really don't know. And I feel like this industry is a harder industry to crack into in that regard, because it's very much still kind of pirate based.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, even though there's a lot of dissension in the industry, there's also a lot of loyalty in the industry. And there's a lot of guys that have been in the trenches together for a lot of years. And even if they hate each other, they're going to still go to bat for one another if push comes to shove. I mean, they're going to protect one another and they're going to work to protect this industry, right? So I think that's the tricky part, if there's any truth to that theory, which I can't say one way or the other. You know, I don't go to these meetings and see these executive people from L'Oreal at these meetings. I mean, if they're there, they're there behind the scenes and they're not meant to be seen. It's like one of those kinds of things. But when I'm at these meetings, I see other industry people there. You know what I mean? I see people that are like trying, you know, it's people from Eternal, or it's people from other brands in the industry that have a vested interest in making sure that their companies are complying with these federal regulations, you know, and trying to ensure that the tattoo community still has a voice in the decision-making process of what those regulations are going to look like.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a potential that a lot of this is going to maybe minimize the ability of shopping for tattoo products on Amazon, or do you think that's going to increase?
So Amazon is its own beast altogether. I have our brand on Amazon, and I went through all the steps of brand registry with Amazon to be able to protect other counterfeit sellers from selling our products on the platform, or buying my product and price gouging the product, or driving the price down on the platform. So we've done all that. We've submitted like our FDA certifications for specific products. So right now, for example, like all I'll sell on Amazon are things that the end consumer can use, like aftercare products, or I don't sell any kind of things that a person can go use to do a tattoo with.
Yeah.
Outside of like our stencil primers, which big deal, right?
Yeah.
Who cares? But like, I think as regulations get put into place, Amazon is one of those platforms that is very focused on compliance.
Yeah.
So if the federal government comes along and says, hey, we noticed that this tattoo brand ink is selling on Amazon. Do you have XYZ documentation for that brand's product so that we know that it's a legally safe product that falls within the parameters of what these regulations say it has to be? Mm-hmm. I think that's where Amazon will get to. So I think a lot of products will fall off of Amazon, just like they'll fall out of the industry, because take tattoo inks, for example. That's a huge one. Like that's really being strictly focused on right now, is what's in tattoo inks and is it safe, etc. Mm-hmm. So like in Europe, for example, they've stripped a lot of ingredients out of tattoo ink because of studies that they've done have deemed, regrettably, that they're not safe when they get lasered or when the ink is exposed to extreme temperatures, right? It can do things in the body that makes it harmful to the body. Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the pigment itself or it being dangerous when it's applied to the skin. The focus is more along the lines of what can happen with this pigment after it's in the skin for 20 years and it's exposed to the sun's radiation and those kinds of things. You know what I mean? So now these regulators are more focused on, like, we have to make sure that the ingredients in these products are safe for the long term, not just for today, but for the long term. Like, is this pigment going to still be safe 20, 30 years in this person's life, in this person's skin? Because it's a permanent fixture in their body after they've gotten that tattoo. So I think I'm kind of grateful for these regulations, because I think it's going to whittle out a lot of the bullshit products.
Yep.
Because what we talked about last week on the podcast was like, hey, as an artist, I'll even ask you the same question. How educated are you on the products that are on your workstation right now? How much do you really know about what you're using on your client? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we try to do due diligence to get the best quality products we can, but when it comes to the longevity of it goes back to we don't know, because the information's not readily available or presented. But people don't think about it from that perspective. I think a huge thing that artists need to talk more about and think more about is that longevity. So to have that information and for it to actually be a topic of discussion, it is important. No different than when we talk about portraits, high contrast utilization of black for realism, even fine line tattoos. We're thinking of the here and the now, but how do we make sure that something lasts long term? Now that's for the visual. What about the health? And so I think it is an important conversation to have, or at least an open line of communication to be able to have in the industry. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think it will shed a lot of light on what it is we're doing as permanent artists.
Well, yeah, not having those conversations is really what's driven those changes in the industry, right? The fact that we've grown to the scale that we're at, and the fact that, again, I say this over and over to people, it's not our fault that we're where we're at, because we're artists. We don't focus on those things day to day. You just said it yourself. You're like, we do our best to try to educate but look, let's face it. I'm talking to my client about the tattoo they want. I'm focused on designing the tattoo they want.
Yep.
I'm focused on applying the tattoo properly to their body. And I'm focused on executing that tattoo flawlessly and giving them a piece that they're going to be proud of for the rest of their life. That's the scope of my focus.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
As it should be, you know, like an artist should be able to believe that the products that they're buying are good long term. That shouldn't be their primary focus.
but that's what I mean. It hasn't been our focus to collectively say, hey, Tuesday next week, guys, we need to get a group of us together and we need to talk about this subject.
Yeah.
But that's never happened in our industry really on a large scale, to where it would have been good if it would have happened, because we could have created these rules as we went along, and we could have created a trade organization more or less, to which now you have the APT kind of trying to reinvigorate that process and become that trade organization that's really kind of helping spearhead a lot of this stuff. But education's another one, you know, and when we're talking about like apprenticeships, what you mentioned earlier, you know, it's like there isn't really a standardized method to an apprenticeship. It's like, if I'm an aspiring artist that wants to learn how to tattoo, I either A, go on YouTube and try to figure it out, or B, maybe, very slim maybe, I can find an artist that I look up to that will take me on as a mentor. Yeah. That's a very slim chance of happening in today's world, you know, because I might look up to you as an artist and I'll be like, hey, Mikey, I want to learn how to tattoo, man. Can you teach me? And you're like, dude, I got this force of focus thing. I don't have any room in my yellow zone, bro. Sorry. You know what I mean? Like, I just can't do it. I'd love to help you, but I can't. And that's 9 times out of 10 what the answer is going to be to an aspiring artist. You know, they're going to show an artist their profile or their portfolio is not going to be good enough for whatever no, you need to go back and draw for another year and then come back and talk to me. You know, they might get an answer like that.
Yep.
And then they're 9 times. I learned this lesson in the supply shop because I would get scratchers coming in to buy supplies, you know, and I'm faced with a dilemma right then and there. Do I treat this guy like shit because he's not doing things the right way, kick him out of my shop, knowing full well that that's not going to deter him from his mission?
Yeah.
Or do I take the time, invest in this guy for a little bit, have a conversation with him, understand what his motivation is for wanting to be a tattoo artist, first of all. Then if I think he's on the right path, then I try to stick him with an artist locally that I think might take them on as a apprentice. You know what I mean? Yeah. I feel like that's a better approach from an educational standpoint. But I feel like those are the conversations that we have to be having.
Yeah, I agree. I know in Iowa they've been debating, or at least humoring, the idea of the tattoo school thing. And so one thing that we had proposed was, instead of investing in going tattoo school immediately until it's really necessary, maybe creating a licensing program so that quality artists can be educated in educating, so at least there's an additional license that a studio will need to be an education studio. You know, does that open up your parameters to come one, come all, dog shit education? No, but I think it positions... The one thing you run into a lot is a tattoo artist may be amazing, but they may not be an educator. They may not be able to convey the information properly. They may not have, I don't want to say curriculum, but it may just be kind of, well, just watch, but do that. Like, you see what I just did? Now do that. You know, and there's not a lot of education. If we could educate artists on how to educate apprentices more properly, and there were expectations that needed to be met to get to a point where you go from apprentice to junior artist, then maybe that would alleviate a little bit more of the federal government saying, yeah, tattoo schools, we don't care what you do. At least just collect the money, push them through, let's make it happen.
Right. Yeah. So what are the regulations like? Because it's interesting to me that tattoo regulations vary state to state.
Yeah.
Sometimes not even state to state, county to county in a state. Like in Indiana, for example, it's county to county is different, you know? So like, how is it where you're at?
Iowa is, it's loose, but it's very generic. Obviously, They just dropped the fact that you need either a high school diploma or a GED. That's no longer a requirement, but then it's bloodborne pathogens, first aid, and to say that you work in a licensed tattoo studio. Now the problem is everything is done digitally, so there's no sign off. You just have to say, "Oh, this is where I am." So it's extremely loose. But
So nobody's fact checking.
yeah, well, and the problem is we don't actually technically have a tattoo program. They have a category on the website for the tattoo program, but there's actually no program. So all the money collected from tattoo licensing just goes directly back into the licensing department, which goes to the Department of Public Health. So they can't show proof of greens, so they actually utilize like pool inspectors, public pool inspectors, to do the health department's inspections. So what's been nice is Brock and I have kind of set the standard. And so when they come in and do our inspections, we walk them through, show them what it is they're looking for. We have a really clean, nice, put together shop with all of the requirements, all the expectations that a studio will ever need. So then we're kind of helping hand in hand with the Department of Public Health to know what to look for, because shops just get passed. Because when somebody wants to check the piss levels in a public pool and then they want to come and accidentally grab your sharps container by hand, it's like, we're missing the mark here.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you said that licensing money just goes back into the licensing pool, and then that just goes back into the general fund. I mean, that's like, we need to have systems in place where that money stays in the tattoo community and is used to strengthen the tattoo community and those processes and procedures. Get the right people in place that actually know about the craft, about the safety of the craft, and that can actually go into a shop and inspect things properly. That's a huge thing that we're lacking now. I hit on this with our board of health a while ago, because I was like, nobody ever comes around, nobody, and so I had asked our state people. They're like, well, we can't afford to pay people. Like, we just don't have people. Yeah. If we're not getting complaints from the public, we're not going to invest any time and energy into it, kind of a thing. And I'm just like, that's really weird, because like, I mean, dude, I'll never put people on blast, but it amazes me. Like, you can go into shops and some people don't even have bloodborne pathogen training.
Yeah.
It's wild to me. You know what I mean? And that's scary from an artist standpoint, because dude, like, you're dealing with blood and plasma all day, every day. Like, it's the most risky thing in your job. You got to know that basic thing for sure.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about like public health safety alone, your own personal safety, what it is you unknowingly, if you're not washing your hands properly, what it is you're taking home, under the beds of your nails, just by touching something you never would have thought could have potentially been contaminated. There's so many different variables. Yeah. And I think that goes back to intentionality. How many times have we said in this conversation, tattoo artists, they don't take an active measure frequently to be advocates for stopping things from happening. They just get really upset after things occur.
Right.
And if you want tattoo artists to be advocates and useful, valuable components to what happens in their cities, in their states, in their counties, take an active stance, go to the Department of Public Health meetings, because they have them, and generally they are open to the tattoo public. You may not get an invite until you put your name and number in the CRM to be told when these things occur. So actively reach out, get to know it, and become a part of the solution. That was something that we had to do. And now we go to all of the Department of Public Health meetings. We don't go in there with picket signs pissed. We go in there and we have a good quality exchange of dialogue, which actually helped me become the articulate dude I am now. Once upon a time, I realized talking like a tattoo artist is not going to help position me to be seen as someone they're willing to listen to, because everyone judges a book by its cover.
Okay.
So I worked really diligently on working on the context of that book. So I don't go in angry. I don't go in emotionally reactive. I don't go in with an opinion. I go in and I just have an open line of communication and quality dialogue to be able to show them what elements they're missing out on and why things just genuinely won't work from a bureaucratic standpoint, and they listen.
Right. No, yeah, that's good because it's crazy to me. Like I make the comment all the time. I think it's crazy that the hair industry is more regulated than the tattoo industry, right? Like not to say that cutting hair isn't an important task, but it's nowhere near as invasive as a tattoo, right?
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me that, you know, I can't just go in and buy a pair of scissors from the beauty supply store.
Yep.
I have to show a license for that, no matter where I go, whatever state I'm in, like across the board. But like here, you can go to one state and you don't need any license, and you can go to another state and you got to go through all kinds of red tape to get a tattoo shop opened, you know?
Yep.
Same thing with products, you know, like up in Michigan, for example. I don't know if it's statewide, but I know an artist at least in one county where they banned green soap. The Board of Health banned green soap.
Okay.
Yeah, because, you know, green soap's actually a surface cleanser.
Yeah.
But we use it on people's skins, and it's actually pretty harsh chemical.
Well, that's why we dilute it so aggressively, I imagine.
Some people do.
Yeah.
But that goes to that education thing, you know what I mean? Where is that in our tattoo education that says, hey, you need to dilute green soap 10-1 or 20-1 or whatever the ratio is? Nobody tells you that.
Yep.
They say, I'll put some in a bottle and put some water in it. Or, dude, I know some people that just use it straight. You know,
Yeah, just put the spray right in the bottle and go to town.
Yeah, dude. I mean, so it's all that educational stuff that we're missing. And I think that probably was driven by some negative outcome happened, and the Board of Health got a notice, and they're like, well, you guys can't use this anymore.
Yep. That makes sense.
Don't use it anymore, you know? And so then they're like, well, what am I supposed to use then? You know, it's like,
well, again,
so
I think this goes back to the earlier conversation. Like, what the tattoo industry needs is quality leaders. You know, people who are willing to take that extra stance. More power to, like, Ben and the APT and what they're doing. Yourself out there gathering all this information to ensure that you're not only compliant, but you're front runners of what it is that's going to be changing in the next 1 year, 3 year, 5 years. But does every state know who that person is or those people are? Or do they even have them? Because a lot of the time we wait until the government gets upset about green soap, and then we get mad that we can't use it anymore. Where we should be going through these things like, okay, this is where we're missing the ball. This is what it is that can be changing to set ourselves up for success from an oversight perspective. This is what we need to change just in-house. The little tiny things. I mean, at Legacy, there's an artist named Bacon. It's not his God-given name, but he goes by Bacon. Just gonna let it be. And his love and passion for his cleanliness and his setup and breakdown procedure is the most passionate thing I've ever seen. So when people go through an apprenticeship at our studio, no different than the way we've done the Force of Focus, each veteran artist has a zone of genius that they're passionate about. So don't ask all of us all the questions. You go to Bacon, he's going to walk you through your setup and your breakdown procedure, and he's going to make sure that you are given all of the valuable information you're going to need and watch you as you do it. If you want to know more about color composition or contrast or just proper design for a body part, Brock is your dude. Go talk to Nick. You know, if you want to know more about your business structure, strategy, your marketing, and how to be able to navigate all of this properly once you get through the wall, I'm your guy. But you don't need to ask everyone these questions. You know where to go. And we're going to make sure that you get that information. I think that's a good practice.
it is. And I think that's the direction that we need to go. And I think being in that leadership position is a tricky place to be because you're kind of, our industry is very, I don't know how to say this the right way. It's very, you run a high risk of persecution when you step out there in some areas. You know what I mean? Like if you talk about, for example, education, right? And how you think education should be structured. If you use the word tattoo school with the wrong people, there's all kinds of hot trigger words that can just put you in a bad But I mean, that's the way the world is in general these
Yeah.
days. I mean, it's just like everybody wants to fry each other, it seems like, you know? So I think when you stick yourself out there like that, you run a risk of those kinds of things. But isn't that the way it is in all walks of life? I mean, you probably talk about those things a lot in your motivational and coaching sessions.
Yeah, there's two things. So the reason I started the Force of Focus working with creatives struggling with a very specific problem is because I was afraid of that persecution. I didn't want to put myself under the microscope in the industry I dedicated most of my life to. It scared the shit out of me, but I did it anyway. I eventually had to because it's where my heart was. I dedicated more than half my life to something. But to follow that up, never once has someone who is where I am or higher ever had a negative thing to say about anything that I put out there or have done, which leads you to believe the only people who will persecute are the people who refuse to actually take action. Going back to the opinions don't change anything, actions do.
Right.
So the only people who are going to negatively persecute with an opinion are the people who are inferior and refuse to do the things that are going to get them to a position that they can then help other people. So leadership should be the goal. If not other people, yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we as an industry are in a position where it's more necessary now than I think it ever has been, because it used to kind of be inevitable. When you go through the old apprenticeship process, you were broken down only to get built back up. Yeah, there were some really weird things we were doing in the industry back then. But like you had said about the providers of the products you produce, you may not get along, but you've got each other's backs because you're on the same damn mission.
Right, right.
And as everyone there has scaled up into more of the business and the infrastructure and the product production as opposed to the boots on the ground tattooing process, we've been left with just this waiting room of artists waiting to be guided in the right way.
Yeah, I have I talk to a lot of people and they're always trying to push me in this certain direction, you know, but they're like, yeah, that article you wrote's great in Skin and Ink magazine. You need to really be talking about that more out here. You know, you need to be that voice. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, man, I don't know, man. There's a lot of people that shit on me for that. You know what I mean? Like, I wrote that article on gatekeeping a couple issues ago, and that one just like that was I've been writing in Skin and Ink magazine for like 3 years now, and that was the first time the editor ever hit me up, and he was like, dude, I don't know if I can publish this article. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I put it out there for a couple people, man, and they're not happy about it. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And they're like, you just they're just like, you can't be talking about this stuff. Like, you can't just be opening the gates and like giving all this education away to people. And I said that wasn't my that wasn't what I said. I said we need to strengthen the gates is more or less what I'm trying to get at. You know, it's like the gates are already open, dude. You got YouTube, you got TikTok, you got Instagram, you got you go on there, dude. It's all over the place. You got Amazon. Anybody can be a tattoo artist today.
Yeah, you got an Amazon Prime and a YouTube account and an Instagram handle that says it.
Anybody can be.
Yep.
We got to shut that shit down.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I'm like, if you go out to Oregon's probably the strictest state when it comes to being a tattoo artist. I mean, and not to say that it's what it needs to be, but just in the scheme of comparatively speaking to Oregon versus other states, it's a lot more that you have to go through to get your license to tattoo in Oregon. Yeah. Which is a great step in the right direction, but it's not even where it needs to be. You know, I had a friend who's a tattoo artist in Oregon named Heather Miranda, and she's an excellent, phenomenal tattoo artist. But she actually spent 2 to 3 years of her life putting together like this serious tattoo education curriculum, not just application of tattooing, but color theory, composition, anatomy, tattoo machine building. I mean, everything that you would learn in an apprenticeship, but so much more, you know, so much more. Different skin types. I mean, all the things that you probably wouldn't learn about in a traditional apprenticeship even, you know? I think that's where the industry needs to get to, and I know a lot of people aren't going to like this opinion, but I feel like we need to have a trade school of some degree, but needs to be taught by industry professionals, like you say, that have that area of expertise, that know this part of it, And that's what they teach people, and they get paid well to teach people that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But when you come out of that program, just like any real legitimate program, you're coming out fully loaded. I mean, you're educated, you know all the ins and outs. There's not a whole lot of gray area left. Whereas go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say that's kind of the next evolutionary step, because as mentors become more prevalent, all that really is a pass or fail of higher education. When people invest in themselves in something to help refine their tattoo talent, when it comes to them going to seminars, when somebody invests in somebody to help them refine their business structure strategy, a marketing agency that'll actually teach them what they're doing while they're doing it, so it's a done with you, not a done for you. All people are doing is truly investing in higher education. If we can pull the cringy social media term of coach off of it, and you realize, are you investing in education that is going to help you produce a more quality result for your future? All we're doing is spreading out the same thing you just said in a magnitude of ways. The evolution is going to be everything coming into one location. That's kind of why we've done the 4 different members of leadership. But whether people believe it's necessary or not, it's inevitable. People who get their hair done, who want to spend top dollar on a quality job, go to someone based on the accolades they have and the environment in which they're in. There's a difference between somebody who went to this quick, just out of high school GED cosmetology school, and somebody who invested in themselves to go to one of the top name reputable education places, and people will buy based on those accolades. We have in a sense done this to ourselves because it's a saturated market. People are going to start shopping not just for the art, but for the artist, based on what it is they're going to provide and what it is they have to offer you from an experience perspective. So whether people like it or not doesn't matter anymore.
Right. Why do you think people are so turned off to those kinds of things? It's like the coach term, for example. Let's apply it to any number of things: coaching, education, evolution. Why do you feel like society is so negative towards those kinds of things in general?
I'll speak for the tattoo industry. Well, because every time you open your phone, you see an ad of somebody saying, I don't want to call anyone out specifically, but let's just say you see a real cringy ad that's got a direct call to action about how it is they can book you 3 appointments in the next week for some low barrier entry point. And it's exhausting. It's all door-to-door encyclopedia salesman shit anymore. And it's because as tattoo artists, we just want to do what we want to do and we want to love doing it, but we're neglecting the front and the back end of the business.
So you think it's more or less just that constant fucking shit being shoved down the consumer's throat?
Yeah.
That makes them negative towards those kinds of things?
Yeah. And I do, because if you really get down I think there's a lot of ego that makes people believe, like, well, what do you have that I need that's going to make me better, and how can you prove that your life doesn't suck behind closed doors? They're not wrong to have that assumption. I still wonder that on a frequent basis. But I think it's partly, it's getting out of control. It's getting out of hand. It's partly because we want to believe that we already have it all figured out because of the ego and the rock star attitude people just come into the tattoo industry as. And I think it's because we haven't really comprehended what forever truly means and how we set ourselves up to have a good forever, as opposed to just prioritizing, it's good enough right now. Going back to the same thing we had said, like with the prioritization of the actions that we're taking forward. When you look at any high achiever, any success story, any athlete, they have coaches for stuff to make them better at the stuff they're not great at so that they can perform at a higher caliber.
Right.
There's nothing different about us except for the fact now you've got snake oil everywhere. you know?
I think it's much easier to sell snake oil today than it was back when the guys actually had to do it out of a covered wagon, you know? Well, hey, man, I'm not going to keep you any longer, dude. It's your kid's birthday, man. I'm going to let you get back to that, and that's important. But I really appreciate you taking time with me today, and I'm glad that you reached out to me a few months ago and that we've been able to communicate back and forth and learn a little bit about one another. And I'm happy to learn more about your stuff today and what you're doing. I think it's good, and I've got a much better, clearer picture of everything. But if people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
You can shoot me a DM on the Force of Focus on Instagram. My arts page is Michael Getz Creations, just in case you want to know where are your tattoos. Let me tell you this. If you're a tattoo artist and you're accidentally making posts for other tattoo artists, that's why you're not getting busy, is because you're marketing to other people to impress artists, not your clients. So I've separated the two. I have Michael Getz Creations and the Force of Focus so that I know my target demographic. I recommend you do the same. Make sure you know the client that you want to work with. So yeah, Michael Getz Creations, the Force of Focus, both on Instagram. Hell, I mean, I'm on WhatsApp. I'm everywhere. If you need anything, let me know. I'm not going to try to upsell you on shit until I know you're ready for it anyway. Got a question, let me know. I'll answer it for you. Let's make it easy.
And you did say earlier that there are some clients that you just kind of shoot down right from the gate. So what specific people are you trying to connect with?
So if we want to talk about like clear, articulate, like avatar, I like working with artists who have been in for 3 to 5 years. I have worked with newer artists. One of the artists that I work with, a gentleman named Colin, I'll call him out right now. He's the hardest working dude I know. He will do everything. He will ask me every question and he will follow through. And it's kind of rare. I want to make sure that you know what being in the industry feels like, looks like. We work with artists from usually 5 years and up. We want to know that, you know, you're willing to do the work. If you want the easy answer, if you want a system that's going to perform perfect for you, it's not going to happen. Anybody who tries to sell you a cookie cutter program doesn't have you in mind when they're trying to sell it, because as individuals, we need an individual program. We need individual attention, and that's why we do what we do. So I'm willing to get on calls with everyone. If I can't help you with where you're struggling, I'll make sure I find you someone who can.
Okay, cool. So if an artist or another person has interest in the Force of Focus, Instagram's the best place to go. Check the content out there, or do you generally point them somewhere else? That's the first stepping stone.
And Instagram is just, it's performed the best for us. So yeah, shoot me a DM there. It's okay. And the weird part is, I'm the one who will respond to you. I'm in there. I'm in the trenches. I'm doing all the thing. Yeah, I make time for that too.
Yeah, and you're tuned in for sure, because I remember the first time I messaged you on there, you were like, oh yeah, I saw you click through one of my posts or something, and I was like, dang, this guy's got tracking on everything.
People still call me insane. I send a personal video message to every follower I get.
Really?
I say their name, I find something on their page that I relate to, and I give them gratitude for just being here.
That's crazy. Yeah, see that you're making huge time commitments, man. You got to have a couple of clones back there somewhere.
I wouldn't know what to do with more of me if I had them.
Well, thanks for taking time with me today, man. I really appreciate you, and it's been great. And I'll talk to you soon for sure.
Yeah, man, I appreciate your time today.
All right, brother.
Yeah, take care.
Yeah. That's a wrap for this episode of The Business of Tattooing. I appreciate you tuning in and being part of this journey to level up the industry one conversation at a time. If you found value in today's episode, do me a favor. Subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another artist who could use this knowledge. Got questions or topics you want me to cover? Hit me up on Instagram at NoFlashNinja or email me at rob@electrumsupply.com. And remember, tattooing is an art, but running a successful business is a skill. Keep pushing, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time on The Business of Tattooing.